technology side of things in favor of exploring a different approach toward understanding at least some UFOs. Citing Vedic history, our recent history, and some eyewitness cases, she will discuss beings who can travel through space and time, symbiotic UFOs, and spacecraft that are alive. Perhaps this approach to UFO research can bring us clues to understanding our multidimensional existence. Serena Wright Taylor has explored the realm of extraterrestrials, UFOs, and other dimensions since childhood. She is an intuitive Vedic astrologer and associate producer with Conscious Life Expo and on the board of directors of MUFON Orange County and Starworks USA. So let's give a warm welcome to Serena Wright Taylor.
Thank you, Eric. Can you hear me all right? Is it on? Oh, I've got to turn it on. Thank you very much. Well, it's really great to be here to speak, and especially to be opening for Dr. Bob Wood, because he's the star, I'm just the opening act. And I'm really happy to be able to do that. I'll put the first picture on. Organic UFOs and multidimensional beings. To better understand UFOs, we must incorporate the existence of other dimensions, consciousness, and organic UFOs. I first joined MUFON in LA, I think it was early 90s, and some of you probably were coming to MUFON then as well. And in those days, we always said, it's got to be nuts and bolts if it's MUFON, because we're trying to impress and convince mainstream science. And so they only believe what they can touch and see, and what they think is, that's why they think it's real. So we have to be very nuts and bolts. But of course, as we learned more about UFOs, we realized that their science is so far ahead of ours, so different from ours, that we couldn't, there's no nuts and bolts in it, that's for sure, unless maybe people made a UFO, they might put nuts and bolts. But there's not even any seams or anything like that in UFOs. But the science is so far ahead that it makes us seem like cavemen compared to them. And so we can't really call it nuts and bolts, and we have to go with the understanding that there's more to it. That's the incorporating of organic and inorganic together and things like that. And so some of the cases I'm going to talk about will show that more clearly. Well, how everything started for me is what I want to start with. And this is a pond. And if you're like me, when you see any picture at a UFO conference or MUFON, you think, where's the alien? Whatever they put on the screen, I'm looking for where the alien is, right? Or if it's the sky, I'm looking for a UFO. Well, there isn't an alien in this picture, but it's very important because it's how things started for me. I used to study pond life when I was little, right from when I was really young. And we had a pond that was just like this. But I didn't use our photos from my home because they were all black and white and they were really dark and you couldn't really tell if it was a pond. So this was exactly what it was like. And right from when I was really small, I'd be having my head, I actually even fell in once, but I would be looking really closely into the pond and learning about mosquito larvae and all the little insects that live in the pond, and then putting them in jars and studying them. And then when I learned to read, I would study books about insects and things. But the thing is, I would play with that during the day, but then it would be like there was a pond on my ceiling sometimes, but it was the universe. And by the way, these beautiful paintings are done by my husband, Douglas Taylor. He's a visionary artist, so he helped me recreate what I used to see in visions at night. And so sometimes, not every night, but sometimes when I was little, I would wake up just as I was going to sleep. I would open my eyes again, and I would see the ceiling with all these different kinds of things, the universe on it, and all these different kinds of craft on it. And I was really sort of I could have been taken out of my body to a different place, or it could have been a hologram that they were teaching me the extraterrestrials or my spirit guides or my higher self was teaching me about the universe and saying the message really was that it's like a pond up there too. And the creatures that you're watching during the day undulating around in the water, they're up there in the sky too. And so that became an understanding that I had from seeing these visions. And I'm sure some of you have things like that happen to you, whether it's this kind of particular information or a different one. I think many dreams are not really dreams, they're classes, the way we learn things. So these different kinds of craft. Oh, and I don't have a laser pointer, do I? I do? Oh, is that the middle? Oh, okay.
Just press that button.
Okay, so there's kind of over here, there's like what I used to call a serpent or a dragon. I used to call them dragons. And I used to tell my parents I've had these visions, but I called them, they said, oh, you've got pretty amazing dreams. But these things were alive. It was like they were alive in space, but I wasn't scared, I was just watching them. Then I would see wheels, and I called them wheels, but now we know about space stations and that they're round. But at that time, I forgot to say, I wasn't watching TV for a while, we had radio, and then we had black and white TV when I was about maybe 6, 7, 8. But I wasn't allowed to stay up and watch anything scary or anything about space, if there was anything on. I would just watch animal shows and seeing all this stuff. And then there was these what I called buses, and in the dreams or in the visions I had, there would be actually a line going from one planet to another, like either a dotted line or a line, and I could see that people were being taken to one planet and then people were coming back to the other planet. So these are some of the things I saw, and then around UFOs as well. So all that was going on with me at night, so I was always a bit strange. So then, let's see. Oh yes, there's helicopter, that's what I was going to talk about. Over here there's a helicopter. Now I distinctly remember these experiences. And by the way, I would be in the grass. The reason the grass is there, I would be hiding in grass and it looked black. And I remember thinking that the grass looked black compared to all the things going on in the sky, even though the sky looked like it was night. And I remember thinking that to myself. But when helicopters came along, I was scared. And I wasn't scared when I saw the rest of the stuff. But sometimes 1 or 2 helicopters, and of course I had no idea about black helicopters, so maybe more in my 30s or 40s, and how they spy on people or anything. But they came along and I was uncomfortable. And I sensed that they knew that I was watching all the other stuff. So that's part of my experience. So I would learn the space is full of life, just as the pond is full of life. And this vision's come back to me throughout my life. But the thing is, it's important to explain that, because a lot of the rest of the presentation, you'll see these things come into the story. Now, this is a being that I used to see at night in my room. And it's very small. And do let me know if anyone's seen one of these beings, or more. They're usually in 2s. And I've seen them all my life, but particularly when I was young. And again, it would be I would wake up in the night. I would be between sleep and wake, when you can kind of see the other dimension sometimes. And there would be, they little bit like bats, but they move really fast. And so I had to sort of imagine part of the body, because I never really saw the whole body. The wings are a bit like bat wings, but they're not bats. And they spin in the middle. Sometimes they would spin and it would look like a diamond spinning. So there'd be 2 and they'd go like this, and then they would spin in the middle of the room and they would become like a diamond because they were going so fast, diamond shape. And then sometimes they would go around the picture rail, because the houses used to have picture rails where we would hang pictures on. And it looked like they were hanging on to it and going around. And I sensed that they weren't there to harm me, that they were just there, like I would look at birds out the window and watch the birds. It was the same, but they were in my room and they weren't always visible. But it made me a bit uncomfortable because, I knew that no one talked about them, and they were just flying about my room, and I was hoping somebody else might know they exist. I still feel that way. Another time, more recently, In another house we lived in, I was walking down the hallway. It was night. The light was on in the hall. It wasn't on in the room next to me, and it was open. I looked in just without thinking, and there was one in the middle of the room, kind of going around really fast. So then I went back to look at it, and it had gone. Or it's not visible anymore. Because sometimes the other dimensions are visible to us, especially when we're half asleep, and sometimes they're not. And the other dimensions are right with us all the time. And also I wrote, this is a book from when I was about 11 or 12. So this is my writing, and I wrote 2 books when I was little. One was called Things of the Darkness, and the other one was called Things of the Forest. And I included some of the things I actually saw, and then also some other things that I made up just to make it a story. But I haven't published them. My mother tried to get them published, and they said they'd like to see things when I'm older, that they couldn't, publish it at that time. And I don't think this is extraterrestrial. I think it's interdimensional. It's from another dimension. So again, that's how everything started for me. Now I'm going to go a little bit into ancient alien information from the Vedas, and then I'll go to some more recent accounts for people. In the Vedic writings, there's 3 classifications of Vimana. Vimana means spaceship. So there's a basic metallic or material kind that would be tangible. There's a subtle or ethereal kind, and that kind might be gassy or it might be light. It's the kind that can pass through stone. Like there was, we've done a lot of investigations in Puerto Rico, and there people say that the UFOs go into the hill that's covered, it's a forest, but if you go up there, you don't see any door. And the same thing with the lake. We went right close to the lake, and you couldn't see any way that would be a door in it, but they can go through these things. They can go through stone. Then there's the non-material or spiritual UFO or Vimana, which you would only see with very high consciousness. And those kinds of Vimana have no end or beginning because they're non-material. And this non-material was a way Michael Cremo, who also studies this Vedic history, when he was on Ancient Aliens, he would use non-material instead of spiritual because they thought spiritual might sound too religious. But either way, it's the same thing. It's not material. And so those kinds of Vimana would often come to people who were passing, but they were very great saints or something, and that kind of Vimana would come to take them to a higher place. This is a picture that Douglas has painted, my favorite picture. You might have seen it before. And it's called Temple City, and it is one of the higher, more advanced planets. And his studies were, and he's in the audience, by the way, over there, but his studies were different than mine, but it was the same conclusion that people are coming to, is that on the higher planets, people live in very crystalline kinds of buildings, or they would meet there for discussions, and the UFOs or the Vimanas or spaceships also are crystalline, and that's some of those very advanced ones are made of this kind of material. And in the Vedas,
Okay, so being a trader can really suck at times, especially if you're losing a lot of money or trade after.
It explains that there's a gem called Chintamani. And it's like the Philosopher's Stone, but it doesn't just turn something to gold. It can, according to your consciousness, it can change shape, or it can be anything, a UFO, a spaceship or a building. And it said it's in the Brahma Samhita, and in Sanskrit, it says Chintamani Prakasadmasu, which means that in the higher spiritual dimensions, the abodes that people live in are made of Chintamani. And so similarly, I think that some of these higher vibrational craft that we see are also made of that particular crystalline material. A being that you often hear about in the Vedas and in other parts of the Eastern world is Garuda, and he's half man and half bird. And in this one, he has a mouth and a beak, but I think that he just has a beak because a lot of the descriptions of what he does, he has a beak. here's another picture of him carrying Vishnu. And so what we learn, though, is there's not just one Garuda. There are species. They're not just one. And they come from a planet called Kinara. And they all have the same features of Garuda on this planet. And it also describes that they can travel from planet to planet. And actually, at the end, if there's a time, I can tell you a little story about someone who might have seen one. But I'll wait till the end to see if there's time. But they have the ability to have interdimensional travel. They've turned up in various different times and different places. And they just like this one is Garuda. There's a lot of things that Garuda did in a lot of the Vedic literature. But it can also be, he was the king of them, the birds from Kinara, but there's many of them. And of course we have the Horus in Egypt. And it could be that they're also from Kinara and they're also the same species. And a remarkable thing was found, and I don't know if you've seen this online. This is a bell with Garuda on top, and there's lots of those in India, and I've used them in temples because they generally put Garuda on top of the bell. But this particular bell turned up in coal, and the coal was 6 million years old. It was in 1944. No, sorry, 3 million, not 6. I mean, it's all a lot of time either way. So the coal seam that it came from was 3 million years old. And there's an unusual mix of metals, copper, zinc, tin, arsenic, iodine, and selenium. And, some say, well, perhaps it fell in the crack of the coal seam, or perhaps it was in the slurry and got into the coal. So, it may not be that old, but either way, it's kind of old. And you can see from the close-up, it's kind of knocked about a lot. It could have been there a long time, because a lot of the ones now are incredibly detailed, of course. So we don't know about that, but we do know that Garuda turns up all around, everywhere. And they're a species. Now, here, I'm going to go to some caves in India. These are the Chamara caves, and here, I'll use this again. This is the actual drawing on the cave, and it's 10,000 years old. And then this is the head enlarged, so it's the same head there, but it's enlarged. And you can see there's a beak here, and there's claws, and I think this is symbolizing that it has feathers. So it's a sort of bird and a human. And it's in these ancient caves in India, in Chamara. And then also in the same caves, there's these drawings that are also 10,000 years old that look like they are shorter beings with big heads, kind of like the Greys. And there's a story there from in that area that small beings used to come out of a round spaceship and to take people away. And sometimes, I think there was a couple of people who didn't come back. And that's the story in that area. And I have been asked, is there any description of the Greys in the Vedas? And there isn't actually a description of them, but there's some beings called Kimpurushas. And they are, I think they're short beings, but they don't quite look human. And in fact, Kim means, is it? And Purusha means human. So it's like they looked at them and somebody said, is it human? and then it became, which is Kim Purusha. And then that's what they became to be called. Is it human? Is it human? Because they never really were sure. And the Vedas describe that there's 8,400,000 species of life in the universe. 400,000 of them are humanoid, like human types. And we are one of the human types, obviously, but we're less advanced than most of the human types. So, and that's really important when you think about the science of these UFOs. And the things that, you see people, beings walking through walls or being floating, and also how the great sites, the ancient sites were made. Because the kind of powers that most of the people have in parts of the universe, according to the Vedas, is that they can make themselves lighter, they can make things lighter or heavier, they can be invisible, All these are called yogic powers or siddhis, and many, many advanced beings have these. And it's like normal, and we're kind of, that's what I mean, that we're more like cavemen compared to them. So now, later on also, if there's time, I can tell you something about Abhimana and being created. But I want to get to my first case, which is more recent. And you might have heard of this. How many here know about the Carlos Diaz case in Mexico? Oh, not so many. I always think everybody knows these. This is a beautiful case of a very organic UFO. It is my favorite case in UFO history. And it really has an important part of the puzzle. So this is in Tepoztlan, and Tepoztlan is in Mexico, and it's a UFO hotspot. And in fact, somebody I know who didn't really think about UFOs much was just traveling through Tepoztlan, and he saw what he thought was a castle in the sky. He said it wasn't attached to the hill, it was in the clouds, and it looked like a castle floating in the sky. So it was like one of the most amazing thing he'd ever seen, and that was in Tepoztlan. But Carlos Diaz took that photo, and he's the main person in this case. And he's a contactee, and he's a really humble person. And he feels like he was simply a messenger. And many UFO researchers that you would have heard of have investigated this case, including John Mack, Jaime Maussan, Michael Hesseman, Colin Andrews, just to name a few. And this is a close-up of the craft. And his contact started in January 1981. And he was a photographer on assignment for a magazine. And he went to his favorite area, Lookout. It's kind of a lookout area, because he was asked to take a photo of the sunrise for a magazine. And so he had his camera there, and he was sitting out waiting for the sun to rise. And it was in Ajusco Park. And when he was getting his camera ready, he saw this orange and yellow light coming from the valley moving up. And he thought, oh no, there's this forest fire down there. But then as it moved up, he realized it wasn't a fire at all, but he saw the dome of a ship, and there was colors inside it. There was, orange and some red dots, and they were moving inside the craft. And he realized it was a UFO. And so then he took a picture of it, and as it was moving, and then he put his camera on his steering wheel, so that he could balance it and it wouldn't move, and got some very good pictures. And it hovered for just a little while so he could take a couple of photos, and then it shot up into the sky really fast. And this is one of the photos he took, and here you can see the front. You can see the little low fence at the side where I should be using my laser again. This is the edge, of the lookout where he's parked, and that's the UFO coming up behind the trees. And then down here is the hood of his car reflecting the UFO. And that is an amazing photo because, at that time, of course, there was no Photoshop or anything like that. And people asked, well, how come he had the camera? But he was up there to take photos in the first place. So it was perfect how it all happened. And other people have seen this craft, but he was the one who had the camera. So this was the beginning of a wonderful contact. And he kept returning to the same place, hoping to see it again. Over and over, he'd go there and hope, And eventually it did appear. This time it was March the 23rd. So the first time he saw it was January 1981 in January. Then in March 23rd, it came back. And he noticed he was able to get really close. He went through some trees, and he saw how it had little red dots and how it was shaped like a flower. And he felt so good. He said he felt so happy looking at it. It was a feeling that in his solar plexus, like love. He said it felt like love. But he was a little afraid because it was a bit so strange. But at the same time, he felt so good and happy. And then when he was looking at it, someone put their hand on his shoulder, and he became unconscious. And later on he woke up, and then it was dark when he woke up. And it had been raining, but his clothes were dry, so he knew something happened. Oh, this is some proof about it.
Touched by the energy field of the craft. And
later on, Jaime Maussan gave him a video camera.
this footage is real. It shows a large craft, and it is one of the best UFO films ever taken.
And this is from Michael Hesseman's Ships of Light, when he went down there and made a video. So what happened when Carlos woke up, a man came and told him, when he went to his car, that he would gradually remember what happened, and that he was the one who touched his shoulder. And he went aboard the craft, and gradually he remembered what happened. And he went on to have many contact experiences over time. And there's also multiple witnesses of this craft in Mexico and in Tepoztlan. And he says sometimes there were one or two people in the craft, and sometimes it was unmanned, as if it just knew what to do by itself. And he's learnt from many contacts with the craft, and there's two people or one person, that it's made of light energy. And it can even pass through stone and go into caves, as I was talking about, like I was talking about earlier. And these craft are exploring the different life forms on the planet and collecting data, especially the natural beauty, the arts, and the emotions related to these things. The data is kept like a hologram, but something way more advanced than a hologram. Oh, yes. And then sometimes it's really amazing that these little spheres of light, little balls, come down from the ship to collect this data. And in some of the other pictures, you'll see this. This is one here.
Near Ostia, the ancient harbor of Rome. It was
You see some of these little balls of light coming down. And this is another part of Mexico with multiple witnesses, and it's the same craft. And Jaime Maussan said that
the enlargement, the same details are visible as on the Diaz films. Furthermore, little balls of light are obviously dropped from the main craft, the same type of luminous spheres as they are regularly seen over Tepoztlan.
It's wonderful looking at it. You kind of feel like Carlos did, I think. I always do. Jaime Maussan said it was a plasma craft, and he feels that Jaime Maussan. And there's two other pictures here. All the experiences that Carlos had were enlightening and positive. Everything was very positive. Now, these pictures are actually from England, and they were taken in April the 26th, 96, in Chilbolton Observatory in England. And you might be familiar with, Colonel Philip Corso and The Day After Roswell, his book. But he saw these pictures from Carlos, and he met him, and he said he was very impressed with the case. He said that the glowing lights are the propulsion system of the craft. He said whenever we tried to build a flying saucer, it would never fly until we realized that the ET guides the system. The propulsion system is linked to the extraterrestrial. In other words, it's symbiotic. And the next case is going to go into that exact thing. How many have heard of David Adair? Oh, there's another picture of it. David Adair, you're familiar with him? Yeah, he put some of the technology onto the space shuttle. He's very unusual. I was able to talk to him a lot in what we call the old days of the Whole Life Expo. And I took him to interviews as well. And I heard his story many, many times. And his brain is very different. I think it's in 4 spheres instead of 2, all linked up. His brain's all linked up anyway. And he has a photographic memory. And he now he's a recognized expert in space technology spin-off applications for commercial use. So In the 90s, he used to speak a lot at conferences, and he's going to start doing that again. But this is right from when he was very young, he was building rockets. And so he built his first rocket when he was 11, and he was on the front page of the newspaper here when he was 17, and he received an award for the most outstanding in the field of engineering services. Later, he met Stephen Hawking, and when he asked David where his ideas come from, David told him the truth. He said that they come from his dreams. Stephen Hawking replied that he too receives many ideas in dreams. He said, "We are brothers." General Curtis LeMay took David under his wing, because actually he didn't live far away from where he grew up. And there's much more to this story, but as soon as he finished high school, he was taken to Area 51 because he was so advanced. And what happened was the Air Force officials, it was June 1971, they asked him to demonstrate his latest rocket and to change the coordinates to Groom Lake. And then he was taken there, and he was saying, "Why Groom Lake? Why in the middle of the desert? There's nothing there." And he couldn't understand why, but of course that was Area 51. So he was taken there, and then they showed him his rocket, and then he said, "We want to show you something else." And they took him down many levels. They took him into a hangar, they took him down many levels. He describes all that in incredible detail. And they didn't tell him what this was. They just said, "We want you to look at it and see if you can explain it to us." And it was in fact an engine. And it looked like his own invention, but much, much, much bigger. His invention was an electromagnetic fusion containment engine. And I know Dr. Bob will know what that is, but I haven't a clue. But he'll tell you next. But this was much bigger. And remember, this was only an engine. It wasn't the UFO or the spaceship. It was just the engine of the spaceship. And it was the size of a Greyhound bus. And his engine was the size of a watermelon. So he knew when he looked at that the ship that it comes from must be enormous. But he didn't say anything because they weren't telling him anything about it. So the exoskeleton, the outside of it, he called it an exoskeleton. It was smooth and warm, unlike the cold room it was in. So they were keeping it in this cold room. Nothing was plugged in or anything. But when he touched it, beautiful swirls of white and blue rippled across it. And he could see that it was not being heated by an outside source. And the heat was coming from the engine itself. And of course, there's no earthly science. I mean, he knew earthly science, and there was none. And no nuts and bolts, of course. And so there was a damaged part, which really showed that it was either shot down or it crashed in some way. And he got into it for a short time. And he said the whole thing, these are his words.
Duffy. No. You're up. Mm-hmm.
Both organic and inorganic incorporated together. He continued, it has these vertebrae that branched off, cascading fiber-like. They look like fiber optic cables filled with some kind of fluid. They were very small tubes the size of angel hair pasta. There were millions of these things cascading over the hull of the engine. He said it looked like neural synaptic firing patterns, and he thought that maybe the engine was designed with an exoskeletal brain. Whenever he touched inside the engine, there was a tremor of visual lights. And remember, we talked about Colonel Corso and how he had said they didn't know how to fly a UFO in the old days, and they were trying to figure it out in the previous times until they found out it was linked to the mind. Well, this was before that. This was when they were trying to figure it out. And they brought him, because he had such a great mind, they brought him there to try to figure it out. And the thing was that he became angry because, first of all, they wouldn't tell him who made it. And then they said, no, we don't have those people. And then they said, well, who are the scientists trying to work on this? And they said, it was kind of talking down to him, because they said, just like you have vacation, well, the scientists are on vacation. And he thought that was like, why can't they just get them back, you know? And he was kind of taking offense at that. And he could tell that it was extraterrestrial, that it wasn't belonging to, he was saying, this is not from our neighborhood. But he was beginning to realize that. And there was one really dangerous man there, Dr. Rudolph, who had come over with with Project Paperclip. And Colonel Curtis LeMay told him to be very careful about this person because he's dangerous. And, you know, he's the kind of person who could have kidnapped David just because of his mind, you know. And so he had to be very careful what he said. So the reason also that he was becoming angry was that he didn't believe, he was so patriotic, and he didn't believe that they would keep the secret, not only of the Area 51, but also of the technology, and that this kind of craft existed. And so what he noticed, the main thing is, that when he touched the craft when he was angry, it was totally different. It reacted differently with kind of an orange and red and flame-like patterns jumping out of it. So he realized, that's when he realized the whole thing is symbiotic and it knows how he's feeling. And it was alive. And he said that to me so many times. It was alive. And he also said there was a presence just like a person or entity. It was not just heat sensitive, but it would react to the minds of the occupants. He also realized that whoever built the engine had to be in deep space, away from gravitational fields. When he realized this was extraterrestrial, they wanted him to leave. And then, or maybe not, but with the help of Colonel Curtis LeMay, he was able to leave. So that's a kind of shortened version of the whole story of David Adair. But he's starting to speak again. They're making a movie of his life. Oh, I've got 15 minutes left. I better hurry. And he will be speaking at UFOCon this year. So I will tell you the next. I've got to get through a lot of things really fast. This is another story of an organic UFO. This is. I've jumped one page here. This person is named David also, but he's a different person, and he's a seaman. And it started in 1962, this story. This is the USS Finch, and Seaman David, which is different David, was with the US Navy from 1960 to 1980. In 1962, he was promoted to seaman and was serving aboard the Finch, which was a destroyer escort. The Finch took part in Operation Dominic. The operation was a series of nuclear weapons testing, which you may know about. In October 1962, Seaman David was aboard the Finch when one of the detonations caused the crash of a UFO into the Pacific Ocean. This was near the Johnston Island Atoll. UFO and USO, which is unidentified submerged objects, encounters were common during these exercises. Other members of the crew had seen many strange objects above and below the ship in the water. They would see large numbers of bogies, that's what they called them, in the upper atmosphere. They would always disappear from the radar just moments before the detonation, because we know UFOs and extraterrestrials are very concerned with the nuclear weapons. So they would be coming around to see what was going on, and when they knew there was a detonation, they would get out of the way. But then, in October 26, 1962, one fell from the sky into the sea. And I'm just going back to the picture of the ship. And this is what he says. This is quoting. What appeared in the sky, what I saw was a huge cigar-shaped object. It looked like it was 2 football fields in length. It appeared to have some kind of blue glow at the stern and was coming past us at a moderate rate. My judgment is that it had been traveling at least 400 miles an hour. They tracked it, and it had descended into the ocean. David heard that the pilots had seen it enter the water, and several ships were en route to its position. He then signed an agreement not to speak about this whole incident for 20 years. David often thought about the experience, and then years later, in 1976, he met a senior Navy diver at Guantanamo Bay. And this is amazing. So they often shared stories, so Seaman David and this diver. And then one day he told David that in October 1962, the same time, he had been in a top secret salvage mission in the Pacific Ocean to pull a crashed UFO from the ocean floor. He volunteered to be the first to dive. When he reached the ocean floor, he couldn't see anything unusual until he realized he was standing on the UFO. So he thought that was the ground. He thought that was the ocean.
The University of Texas at Austin brings you comprehensive 7-month online program in analytics.
Ocean floor, and then he saw that this is actually not, and it was really interesting. But it was a big shock for him, of course, and because it was so huge and so odd looking, and he lost his balance and he slid down the side of the object. He saw that it was like a sponge with organic looking compartments, and when he tried to touch it, his hand went through. This terrified him, and he was brought back to the ship. And it's interesting because he dealt with very dangerous situations, but this was a very scary thing because although it was a peaceful UFO, still it was not from here. And the next day, when they attempted to salvage it, it had gone. So it's as if it was down there regenerating itself and leaving. This picture is Douglas did this recreation again of the ship, and that's actually what the diver would be wearing in those days. And this account of this story can be found in UFOs for the 21st Century Mind by Richard Dolan. Now I want to make sure I include the sky serpents, because remember there was one of my visions when I was young. I would see serpent-like beings in space. Well, these are appearing all over Mexico for a long time now, and they move, and I've got a video of one, but you'll notice with this one, all those little spheres of light, these little balls of light coming out, sometimes it's actually made of little balls, little spheres, or orbs, you can call them orbs, and they join up to form the kind of serpent. We can call it that, but I don't think it is a serpent. And then they sometimes part, so it's shorter, then it's longer. There's all kinds of videos of these things. So they look very much like the dragons I used to see when I was little. And here is a video.
Y estaba en la ruta más o menos a la altura del
See how
centro.
it's moving as if it's in the water, but it's in the
Digo
sky.
también por la hora, pues quién manda ahorita aquí viendo el cielo.
And this is
Lo que está locuaz.
this one drops one of those balls, one of those orbs at one point, and you'll see it underneath it. They're very, very high up, and they've tried using balloons, because some people say maybe it's balloons, and the balloons don't go that high and they don't last. They spent $1,000 trying to make balloons do this, and they couldn't. There, did you see that little orb come out the bottom?
Mira nada más. Qué belleza. Esos cables rojos que se ven ahí son los tendederos de mis vecinos, así que...
There's quite a few videos of these online. And of course, people are getting more of them all the time. And when you first see it, it could be like a dot in the sky. So you have to really look and enlarge it possible.
Y es que yo simple vista ya no lo veo, o sea que si lo pierdo, ya chafió esto. Pero, si mal no me equivoco, tiene que estar viniendo hacia acá, hacia
Oh,
el oriente,
there's the sphere
donde
coming out.
quedo yo ubicado. Este objeto se veía demasiado bajo. Eso es lo que me llamó la atención.
There it is.
Resalta sobre el smog que hay, no crean, o sea, se ve cielo azul, pero...
So they seem very peaceful. They don't do anything except float around as if they're just observing, bringing back information perhaps. I'll go to the next. I've got another video to show you that's even more amazing. very high up also, and this is in Milan, near Milan. This is Antonio Urzi and his wife Simone, and they live in a town north of Milan, Italy. And they go on their roof to get the videos. And many other people have seen them as well with them, including Paula Harris and a whole TV crew. Plane, you saw the plane. He's a fashion designer. It's a bit loud, I think. I don't know if you can hear me. And he's a fashion designer, and he's designed clothes for Lady Gaga. Very space-type outfits. And they started to see UFOs, and that made them go to a conference. Some people go to a conference and then look for UFOs, most of us. But they started seeing UFOs, and they couldn't believe why do we always see them? So then they went to a conference to try to find out. I love this. This is so incredible. So this could be a being in itself, you know, not a ship holding other people, but a light being in the sky. How long do I have? I'll let you see all this because they're wonderful to watch. You can go online and look at Antonio Urzi and see it's URZI. See some of his videos. I get his Facebook videos. So I'll finish there. Going into, I can talk about this for a while, but I won't. I'll just do it really fast. There's in the Vedic texts, there's these cycles of time that repeat themselves just like the cycles of the seasons. You might have heard how we're in the Kali Yuga now. The other yugas were very, very advanced. The thing about the time we're in, though, is actually not so bad. We're at the very beginning, even though, of course, these are huge parts of time you're talking about. Kali Yuga began in 3102 BC, and that we're in the Sandhya period. At the beginning of each yuga, there's a Sandhya period, and at the end, and before the next one. And remarkable things take place at those points, those changes. And it's a time when sometimes great beings come and visit, avatars they're called. All kinds of different things get seen and found out. And so we're also in the beginning of a mini golden age, not a big one, but the mini one within the Kali Yuga, which is 5,000 years in, and then it's 5,000 years growing, 5,000 years going back down again. But it's a time for us to develop a lot of knowledge. And even though it doesn't look like it, it looks pretty bad out there, it's actually a time when there's still a lot of knowledge on the planet about the universe and opportunities to learn from more wise extraterrestrials. And so if we can take action in helping the environment and make positive changes, we can perhaps entice the benevolent ETs, like some of the ones you've seen, to come back and interact with us again. It's not that they would save us, but it's just that they would give some guidance, and we could learn about them and learn how they live on different planets. So I don't know if I've got time for questions, or I could either do questions or I could give a little story.
12 minutes before now.
Oh, okay. So did someone want to ask a question? I don't think anyone had a question.
Yeah, I do.
I have a question.
I know what organic food is. Could you explain what an organic UFO is?
Oh yeah, that was funny because my husband made a joke about that when I said I'm going to talk about organic UFOs. He said, well, we don't eat them, they're non-GMOs. But organic means living. So, just like organic food is healthy because it's grown by itself without any pesticides or things that kill it or make us sick. So, organic, what it really means is that it's alive. It's either, partly alive and then like symbiotic when it needs to have, in other words, the pilot there to tune into the pilot to fly, or it can fly without the pilot even by itself. But yeah, organic means alive, basically. So the UFOs, when I began, I don't know if you heard at the beginning, I was saying they're not nuts and bolts science of this planet. They're so far advanced that to us it seems like they're legends, like it's a legend or like it's magic, like, it can't really exist. But that's because our science is so behind, because really advanced science is organic and inorganic at the same time, like the kind of engine that David Adair saw in Area 51. He's called it organic and inorganic all together. There's one little, I can tell you then, if no one had a question, I was going to say, when I was talking about the Garuda birds, actually somebody might have seen a Garuda bird, and I didn't write anything down because I was in my 20s. And I was living in a temple in London, it's a Hare Krishna temple where we study those things. And one of the boys there would come and tell us, girls who were in the sewing room, the stories of when he was in India, because he just came back from India. And he said he was sharing a room with someone who had been backpacking all over India. And he was also in his 20s, well, kind of young. And this boy was really quiet and sort of looked kind of shocked. And he said, well, did something happen to you? And he said, well, I've seen some strange things. And I'd really like to tell you, but I don't know if you believe me. And he said, no, tell me, because I study all kinds of things. And he said that he was in one village. And again, I don't remember which one it was. But he would go to all these little villages that people don't usually go to. And he saw everybody in the village was carrying baskets of fruit and going in one direction. So he thought, there must be a festival. I'm going to join in and follow them and join in, So he followed them, and they went partly up a hill to a plateau. And they were putting all these baskets on the plateau, and then they were chanting and blowing horns and things. So he joined in, and then he saw that way up, because this was like a foothill, and it was a big mountain. And he saw way up, there was this dot, and it got bigger and bigger, and nearer, coming down from high on the mountain. And it was a big golden bird. And it was so big that he said, there's no birds like this bird in the world. And it came and it picked up some of the baskets or something and flew back up with some of the offerings that it had. But everyone seemed to think that they kind of knew what was going to happen, and of course he didn't. And I don't know if it had arms. I don't know if he got near enough to see that, because the Garuda birds have half human and half a bit like a big eagle, but it was a huge bird. So that was one early story that I learnt in my 20s. But not knowing I was ever going to speak about those things in public, I didn't write down anything about the information. Are we finished? Or did you have more time? Anyone else have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, it's been stated that some of the races, you noted that some of the races are more advanced than we are.
Yes.
Do you have an opinion as to that some of those races are presumably more evil than we are, such as the reptilians? Do you get any feeling for whether the organic UFOs have any quality of evil or good?
That's such a great question. Dr. Bob Wood asked if the entities that are in the organic UFOs, are they the positive or negative kind of ETs? And are all the ETs that are advanced, are they positive, good people or not? And I kind of the particular one, the one that we were talking about with Carlos Diaz, very positive. There was nothing negative ever happened to anybody. He was uplifted. He felt it in his solar plexus. The UFO was studying beautiful things like nature and art. Oh, and I didn't tell you. Well, there's a lot of the story, but the boy who he met, kind of a young man with blonde hair, that was actually from the ship. He told him to come back the next day at noon, and he would help him remember some of the things. And when he came back, he said he couldn't even sleep that night. He couldn't wait to come back. And the man was teaching some children about nature, and he was holding a grasshopper, and he was holding something else, and he was teaching them some things about how nature interacts and how it's all connected. So we know that was a very positive organic UFO. And I don't know about the one that David Adair went in. I feel that one was positive too, and it reacted to whoever who was driving the UFO. And when he was angry, it made those angry kind of lines and energy. And then also, let's see, the one that was on the bottom, I think, of the ocean, that one was very positive, because those ETs were watching and they were so concerned about their nuclear weapons and the fact that we had knocked that out of the sky, but then it was able to regenerate, which shows, again, it's organic. Remember, he could put his hand through it, and as if it was at a certain stage where it had to regenerate, and then it could go on. But going back to the ancient alien expertise I have is all the Vedic. They always talk about the Asuras. The Devas are the Asuras, and the Devas are the positive ETs that are for service and help and guidance and they're doing good. And then there's the Asuras, who are the selfish ones. They're called demons, but it doesn't mean an ugly thing. It can mean just somebody who's more self-serving. And there's a lot of stories about how they are always up against each other in some way in the universe. And having the knowledge, that's in the Vedas too, about advanced craft and advanced science, they can use it either way. So there's some kinds of beings out there who have that knowledge and they use it for their selfish purposes. And it can be very advanced science, but they don't use it to serve others. So yeah, there's always both kinds. But I try to stick to the benevolent kinds in this story, in this presentation. Is my time up now?
What?
I got more time? Oh, okay. Do you want to hear one more story? Because no one's asking questions. Okay, because that makes me think of something. Also from the Vedic, because when we talked about how David Adair said this has to be built in space, remember he said he could tell, because he knew that there's certain kinds of things about that UFO, and again, I don't know, there were very long scientific words he used that Dr. Bob would understand, but he said it cannot be built in a gravitational field, there has to be anti-gravity, the anti-gravity craft. So similarly, it made me think about how they're made. And of course, there's all different kinds of craft, and they're all made in different ways. But the really big motherships, the Vimana that are described in the Vedas, they are, I feel, and I said this at the beginning of the UFO panel if you were there, that they are manifested. But he said it cannot be built in a gravitational field, there has to be anti-gravity, the anti-gravity craft. So similarly, it made me think about how they're made. And of course, there's all different kinds of craft. And pilots had seen it enter the water, and several ships were en route to its position. He then signed an agreement not to speak about this whole incident for 20 years. David often thought about the experience, and then years later, in 1976, he met a senior Navy diver at Guantanamo Bay. And this is amazing. So they often shared stories. So Seaman David and this diver. And then one day he told David that in October 1962, the same time, he had been in a top secret salvage mission in the Pacific Ocean to pull a crashed UFO from the ocean floor. He volunteered to be the first to dive. When he reached the ocean floor, he couldn't see anything unusual until he realized he was standing on the UFO. So he thought that was the ground. He thought that was the ocean floor. and then he saw that this is actually not, and it was really interesting. It was a big shock for him, of course, and because it was so huge and so odd looking, and he lost his balance and he slid down the side of the object. He saw that it was like a sponge with organic looking compartments, and when he tried to touch it, his hand went through. This terrified him, and he was brought back to the ship. And it's interesting because he dealt with very dangerous situations, but this was a very scary thing, because although it was a peaceful UFO, still it was not from here. On the next day, when they attempted to salvage it, it had gone. So it's as if it was down there regenerating itself and leaving. This picture is Douglas did this recreation again of the ship, and that's actually what the diver would be wearing in those days. And this account of this story can be found in UFOs for the 21st Century Mind by Richard Dolan. Now I want to make sure I include the sky serpents, because remember there was one of my visions when I was young. I would see serpent-like beings in space. Well, these are appearing all over Mexico for a long time now, and they move, and I've got a video of one, but you'll notice with this one, all those little spheres of light, these little balls of light coming out, sometimes it's actually made of little balls, little spheres, or orbs, you can call them orbs, and they join up to form the kind of serpent. We can call it that, but I don't think it is a serpent. And then they sometimes part, so it's shorter, then it's longer. There's all kinds of videos of these things. So they look very much like the dragons I used to see when I was little. And here is a video.
Y estaba en la ruta más o menos a la altura del
See how it's
centro.
moving as if it's in the water, but it's in the
Digo
sky.
también por la hora, pues quién manda ahorita aquí viendo el cielo, ¿verdad?
And this is
Tengo que estar locuaz.
this one drops one of those balls, one of those orbs at one point, and you'll see it underneath it. They're very, very high up, and they've tried using balloons, because some people say maybe it's balloons, and the balloons don't go that high and they don't last. They spent $1,000 trying to make balloons do this, and they couldn't. There, did you see that little orb come out the bottom?
Mira nada más. Qué belleza. Esos cables rojos que se ven ahí son los tendederos de mi vecino, así que...
There's quite a few videos of these online. And of course, people are getting more of them all the time. And when you first see it, it could be like a dot in the sky. So you have to really look and enlarge if possible.
Y es que yo a simple vista ya no lo veo, o sea que si lo pierdo... Ya chafeó esto. Pero, si mal no me equivoco, tiene que estar viniendo hacia acá, hacia
Oh, there's
oriente,
the sphere
donde
coming
me
out.
quedo yo ubicado. Este objeto se veía demasiado bajo. Eso es lo que me llamó la atención.
There it is.
Resalta sobre el smog que hay, No querían hacer, se ve cielo azul, pero...
So they seem very peaceful. They don't do anything except float around as if they're just observing, bringing back information perhaps. I'll go to the next. I've got another video to show you that's even more amazing. See, this is very high up also, and this is in Milan, near Milan. This is Antonio Urzi and his wife Simone, and they live in a town north of Milan, Italy. And they go on their roof to get the videos.
Esto por... No.